G'day guys, welcome to this live class, Aussie English live class. It is 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, guys. For everyone listening or watching later on, remember that you can come to these live classes for Aussie English as long as you show up on Facebook at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, and that is Melbourne time. So I believe that is Greenwich Mean Time, 11 plus hours at the moment, guys. So as usual, I'm just going to wait for a few of you to show up. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Make sure the audio is going all right. Or you can give me a love heart if you would like. And also remember to give the video a share. Remember to give the video a share. Tag any of your friends as well if you think that they should be watching right now. Just let me give this a quick share. And then we will get into it, guys. Get into it. So I hope you guys have been having a great week. How's it going, Lima? Natalie, how are you going? I see that you've come into class. It's been a crazy week, guys. So there's been a few things obviously happening. In the last week, we did the sale for the Aussie English classroom, and 69 of you guys joined the class. 69. That's insane. Absolutely insane. I was hoping that between 1 and 10 people would sign up, and we had 69 people. Mind-blowing. Anyway, that's given me a lot of motivation, guys, to put a lot back into the classroom. I've developed now a private group for all of the students, and they can join that group on Facebook. They can complete speaking challenges in there. They can talk to me in there. They can talk to other students. And I'm going to be organizing live classes probably in that group, and joined group calls. That's the next thing that I want to organize with you guys. It's going to be getting on Google Hangouts and maybe using Zoom, those kinds of things, and getting you into groups, because obviously I can't have hundreds of you in the single call, and just trying to work on speaking. So it's all well and good to be practicing listening and reading all the time, but we have to be doing the active side of language learning as well. We need to be speaking and we need to be writing. And so for now, I want to develop the speaking side of things. And Lima will be happy because this week I remembered to bring some water so that my voice doesn't disappear. Alright, so we've got a whole bunch of questions here, guys. As usual, I'm going to go through these questions as a starting point. If you guys have questions of your own, please ask them in the comments here. I'm happy to answer any questions as best I can. I don't know the answer to everything, so sometimes either it takes me a while, I might have to search for some of it on the computer here, or I might even be wrong. You know, we're all human. But I am here to serve you guys as best I can. So if you have questions, then please put them in the comments section. I guess I should tell you a bit about the weekend that I just had before we get into things. So my girlfriend Kel, who, if you've been listening to the podcast, you will have heard the interview that I did with her today. She came down from Townsville. So if you imagine on the screen here, we've got the map of Australia. So there's Queensland up here, there's the coast, Victoria down here. Kel lives up here in Townsville, and I live down here in Melbourne. And Kel flew all the way down to Canberra, which is about here, to do a job interview at the Brazilian embassy. And so despite these being very close, they're still about 9 hours apart if I want to drive. It's still 700, 800 kilometers. So anyway, Kel was going there. It was meant to be just 1 or 2 days for her to do this interview and then fly home. So not really enough time for me to go there. And as soon as she got there, she got off the plane and she got a message on her phone saying that they had delayed the interview for 3 days. So in other words, we've changed the day now to Monday, and you need to just find somewhere to stay until that's ready. And so that is the reason that I went to Canberra. I decided that night, the next morning at 5 a.m, I'll get up, I'll go to Canberra, and it took 9 hours to get there. And then I spent the weekend with Kel. So that was my weekend, hanging out in Canberra. And if she gets this job, which, you know, hopefully, fingers crossed, she gets this job, we'll be moving to Canberra. So that'll be interesting, guys. But we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Anyway, I hope you guys have had a really good weekend as well. I hope it wasn't as stressful as mine, but I hope it was eventful nonetheless. And with that, I guess, guys, don't forget to jump into the description for here, download the freebies if you haven't already, sign up to the Aussie English Classroom if you haven't already, and there's also the phrasal verb course there if you're interested in that. But let's just get started. All right, so the first question that we have here today is from Rocio. Thank you for the question, Rocio. Rocio asked, could you please explain if clauses? When is if not used? I've heard something like, had I known this, I wouldn't have asked, or something like that. Okay. Also, could you add clauses with unless and should? I found them a bit confusing. All right, so there's quite a few things going on there, but I'll try and explain the conditional tenses. So first we have the first conditional tense, which is the condition is possible to fulfill. Okay, we have the second conditional tense, which is that the condition in theory is still possible to fulfill. And then we have the third conditional where it's in the past and the condition is not possible to fulfill. So there's those three main conditional structures, three types of conditional sentences. So let's go through them. The first one is where the condition is possible to fulfill. Okay, if I study, I'll pass the exam. And so you'll notice the structure there is present. If I study, present tense. I will pass the exam, future tense. If I do this, I will do this. This is a very common one. That is the condition number one. If I study, I'll pass the exam. If I shower, I won't smell bad. Okay, now we're using the negative with will. I won't smell bad. So that's number one. Present tense and future tense. If I do this, this will happen. Okay, so the condition is possible to fulfill. Number two is if I do something, if I did something, something would happen. Okay, so this is where a condition in theory is still possible to be fulfilled. So for instance, if I studied, I would pass the exam. Or if I showered, I wouldn't smell bad. So those are different from the first one because now it's past tense at the start, simple past, if I studied, if I showered, and then the conditional tense after it, I would pass the exam or I wouldn't smell bad. Okay, and so I guess the way that I'm thinking about these conditions when I'm setting them is I'm thinking about if I did something, so now we're imagining the present here and the thing in the future. I'm imagining that I'm on the other side of that now. So if I showered and now I'm thinking that I'm here and that showering is in the past tense because I'm now past what I'm setting this condition up to be. So that's why we're using the past tense there for this second condition. If I showered, if I studied. So if I got on the other side of this action and the action was now in the past. If I studied, if I showered, I would pass the exam. I wouldn't smell. And that is why we're using the condition there because it may or may not happen. That's why we're using would. If I did this, I would do this, or I would have this, or I would get this. Okay, so that's the second condition there. The third one is where the condition is not possible because it's over. It's completely finished. Okay, so if I had studied, I would have passed the exam. If I had showered, I wouldn't have smelt bad. Okay, so this time, if we think about how I'm thinking about this in my mind as a native speaker, now I'm thinking about something that is definitely in the past. And now I'm thinking about like, if this thing hadn't happened, so if things had happened differently in the past, and then I'm using would have or would not have, things wouldn't have happened the way that they did after that period until present. So that period is still in the past. Okay, so that's why we're using had done, the past perfect, I believe that is, and then we're using would have done, okay, or would have been, or would have seen. So the conditional, I guess, perfect tense in that case. So those are the three main ones, okay? The first one is present tense and future tense. If I study, I will do well, I will pass the exam. The second one is for a condition in theory to be possible still to fulfill, but we're using the past tense now because we're imagining that we're on the other side of something that we could do in the future, but we haven't done yet, that we still potentially could do. So if I studied, I would pass the exam. And then the third one is where we're thinking about an event that is definitely in the past and the repercussions after that event up to the present. So none of it is changeable. So we have, if I had studied in the past, and then we talk about the past, I would have passed the exam. Okay, so that's what's going on there. I hope that makes sense. To learn these, you kind of just need to start using them, start practicing them, write them out, translate them in and out of your native language. The biggest thing though is just using them. Get out there and use if clauses all the time. If this, then this, okay? Get out there and use it. So Rocio also wanted to know, when do we not use if? Okay, so most of the time you're going to hear if clauses with if. They're very common, you know. You're going to hear if this, then this. But there's a bunch of other words that you can use as conjunctions or on their own at the start of a sentence that can replace the word if. And let's go through some of them, okay? And I'll use the basic structure. The first conditional, you know, if I shower, I won't smell. Okay, that's the basic one with if at the front. If I shower, I won't smell. So if this, then this. We can substitute in as long as instead of if. As long as I shower, I won't smell. We can use so long as. So long as I shower, I won't smell. So these are synonyms for if. That's why we can switch them in and out in this case. Assuming that I shower, I won't smell. On the condition that I shower, I won't smell. On the assumption that I won't shower, or that I will shower, that I shower, I won't smell. Provided that I shower, I won't smell. Supposing that I shower, I won't smell. Unless I shower, I will smell. So you'll notice there with unless is a bit different. Now we have to use the positive. We can't use the negative in this case. So the structure here, instead of if I shower, if I do this thing, then I won't smell. When we use unless, we have to put it, the following clause after the if clause, the clause with unless, we have to make it in the positive instead of the negative. So unless I shower, it's sort of like if I don't shower, unless I shower, these are synonyms. If I don't shower, unless I shower, I will smell. Okay, so that's the one with unless, and then we have with the condition that I shower, I won't smell. So these are all synonyms, guys. But they're where you're going to see if substituted out for things like on the condition that, under the assumption that, unless I do something, etc. Now let's have a little chat about omitting the word if. Okay, this is where we remove it. So instead of, and the same with these other things, right? We're going to get rid of all these synonyms for if, and if just disappears, we're going to do an inversion with some of these auxiliary verbs. And that is where you're going to see, I guess, some of the more tricky English grammar come into play. So Rocio was asking at the start about where you would remove if, and instead of having a synonym for if, you use something like had or should. This is pretty high level English. Most native speakers will probably avoid using this unless they're writing very high level English. It just doesn't come as naturally, but you will hear it from time to time, but it's very posh. It's very high class, okay? So the first one is using had. So this is where we're using the conditional 3. We're talking about had done something. And so when we set this up, instead of saying if you had needed advice, I would have been there to give you advice, we can invert it, and when we invert it, we get rid of if. So we would say, instead of if you had needed advice, we can invert it and say, had you needed advice, I would have been there to give it to you. Had you needed advice. This is one of the rare times you'll see inversions, and it's not a question. It's not a question. So that's because I believe it's an if clause, because you're setting up, you know, this, then this. That'll be part of the reason there why we can invert. and it's not a question. So for instance, if you had needed my advice, we can turn into had you needed my advice, I would have been there. Okay? Another example could be, had I been you, I'd have been nicer. If I had been you, I would have been nicer. So this is talking about something in the past that's unchangeable. If I'd been you, I would have been nicer. Had I been you, I would have been nicer. So we've just inverted it. If I had been you, had I been you, I would have been nicer. So we can do the same thing with were and with should. And these are the same with these clauses, the same thing here with the inversion, okay? So for example, if you were to need advice, so this is a way of saying, I guess it's like if you were to need it in the future, if you were to need it, and that structure is very rare, it's not common to hear. If you were to need something, if you were ever to require my assistance, it's very posh, it doesn't sound, I think most people would give you a weird look if you were like, if you were to ever need my help. But when you hear that structure, if you were to ever need or to require something, I'd be there. We can invert if I were, if you were, if he were. We can invert that to were I, were you, were he to need something, you know, to require something, to be there, whatever it is. Were you to require my advice, I would give it to you. Another one, you'll hear this too. You'll hear this where people say, if I'd been you or if I were you, and they'll switch it to were I you, I would do this. Or were I you, I would be nicer to him. But again, very high level English. But it's where you're going to see if get dropped out. If I were you, were I you. And remember, it's not a question. That's one of those inversions, not a question. All right, should. So again, I guess this is if you should need my advice, I will be there. So this is like conditional number one. If you should need my help, I'll be there. If you should need my advice, I'll be there. And instead of saying if you should, what do we do, guys? What do? We invert it. Should you need my advice, I'll be there. Should you need my help, I'll be there. Should it rain tomorrow, we won't go to the beach. Should it be sunny tomorrow, we will go to the beach. Should my dad get home soon, we'll have dinner. Should my mother get home late, she'll miss dinner. Okay, so these are very high level, but basically this is when you'll see the if disappear, okay, in these clauses. Do practice them if you want, guys, although I think in casual normal English you're not likely to hear this very often. You might see it in movies with very, very intellectual people, especially maybe British movies, but in casual day-to-day language it's very rare to hear should you, had you, were you, okay? Alright, so let's move on to another question. Hoda was asking, why is it correct to say it was he who came into the classroom instead of it was him who came into the classroom? Because he said for him, for Hoda, he would use the second one if it was him who came into the classroom. Before I get into the specifics, I want you to know both can be used, okay? Although the first one mentioned, it was he who came into the class, is technically correct. But funnily enough, this is one of those examples where I would probably say if it was him who came into the class, blah, blah, blah. That is the one I would probably go towards using. So this is one of those examples where incorrect grammar is more common in spoken English than the correct version of the grammar, funnily enough. Okay, but the explanation. So I pulled this explanation off Quora, a website online, I think Quora, or could be Stack Exchange English, because this guy just summed it up really beautifully. Strictly speaking, proper grammar requires subject pronouns be used when they rename the subject. So the subject pronoun he follows the verb to be as follows. It is he. This is she speaking. That to me sounds really weird. I would say this is her speaking. Again, that's an example of me using the incorrect grammar because it's what I'm used to hearing. This is she speaking. It is we who are responsible for the decision to downsize. And It was he who messed up everything. So again there, I would probably say it was him who messed up everything, but apparently the correct grammar is it was he who messed up everything, okay? Also, when the word who is present and refers to a personal pronoun, such as he, it takes the verb that agrees with the pronoun. So you would say, it was he who messed up, and actually that's a bad example. But for instance, it is I who am sorry. You have to say I who am sorry instead of I who is sorry, okay? So there's a bit of tricky grammar going on there. Anyway, the basic idea, Hoda, is that you can use both. It doesn't matter. Technically, it should be it was he who came into the classroom instead of it was him who came into the classroom, but I would probably say it was him who, okay? Don't worry too much about it. People will still understand what you're saying. Fatima has a question here. I often use just in sentences. For example, I just subscribed to your podcast. I just realized what I did. Does it sound native, and is it formal enough to use in an email to a client? So the answer to both of those is yes. It is definitely sounds native. The sentences that you wrote are 100% correct. They are the kinds of things that I would say. And it's fine to use informally or formally. This is one of those things where it doesn't change. There's no informality or formality associated with the word just. But the word just has quite a few different meanings. And again, I had to look this up to answer your question. And this is when I discovered, oh my gosh, it has this meaning, this meaning, this meaning, loads of them. The one that you're talking about, I've just done something, is using just to express time, okay? Recent time. So it's a synonym for recently or a very short time or after speaking. So whatever it is that you're talking about, okay? So where's my phone? I just had it. Right this minute, a minute ago, moments ago, I just had my phone. So we're talking about time now. Just before now, a second ago, I just have my phone. Could you wait for me? I'm just going to the shops. So I'm right now going to the shops. I'm just going to the shops. And so you're going to hear this with the present perfect and the past perfect tenses quite a bit as well, because they're expressing this stuff that's happened in the past right up to now. So it's still affecting the present, and that's why we use the present perfect. For example, like, I've just decided to move to France. Moments ago / now, right in the present here, I've just decided to move to France. And the other example I have here is just before that had happened. So now we're talking about something in the past, and we're wanting to talk about something that happened just before it. That's why we're using the past perfect. Just before this thing had happened, so just before this thing had happened, I was inside the house, okay? So yeah, just can be used to talk about time when you want to talk about something being very close to the present time that you're talking about. So it's just next to it. That's a way of thinking about it. Right next to it, just next to it. We can use just for emphasis, to emphasize the imperative. So instead of telling someone, do it, you could say to someone, just do it. Stop arguing, just do it. Okay, you'll hear that all the time. That's the kind of thing my parents would say to me as a kid when I was misbehaving. Stop arguing, just do it. You could say to someone, stop talking, do your work. Or you could say to someone, just stop talking and just do your work. You can put it in there to emphasize the imperative. And the last one here is, don't think about it, stop thinking about it. Or you could say, just don't think about it. Just stop thinking about it. So it emphasizes the verb. The next one, we can use just to mean only. To mean only. So my first paycheck was just $50. It was only just $50. It was only $50. You can use any combination of those. It was only $50. It was just $50. It was only just $50. When I was 17, I was just 5 foot high. I was only 5 foot high. Okay, so just can mean only. We can use just to mean exactly. Exactly, okay? So You look just like my sister. So you look exactly like my sister. You look just like my sister. So I guess with just, it's pretty much always proximity, you know, in one way or another, proximity to something. But you look almost exactly, perfectly like my sister. You look just like my sister. The cat over there is just like the one that I saw yesterday. So it is so similar, it's just like the one that I saw yesterday. That cat is just like the one that I saw yesterday. And then the very last meaning for just is for it to mean simply or absolutely. Okay, and the examples that I have here are, today's just a perfect day. Today is just a perfect day. Today is simply a perfect day. Today is absolutely a perfect day. It is just a perfect day. Our holiday was just perfect. It was just awesome. It was just brilliant. So it's, yeah, I guess it's almost like it's emphasizing it. It's like saying simply, it's like saying absolutely. It was just brilliant. Something just doesn't feel right. Something simply doesn't feel right. Something absolutely doesn't feel right. So those are the 5 different ways that we can use the word just. I hope you enjoy that one, guys. All right, Nicole has a question now. Nicole has a question. Hi, Pete. Could you explain direct and indirect speech? This was a good one. And again, once I looked this up, I learned something, because despite knowing how to do this, I don't necessarily know the rules. All right, so the interesting stuff here. Direct speech. Direct, meaning it's sort of direct, it's straight to you. Direct speech is quoted speech. So you're directly saying the speech here in between quotation marks, like you're quoting the person. You're saying literally what that person said, okay? And that's why it is direct speech. Indirect speech is obviously not direct, but indirect, and you're reporting the speech. So you're not saying it literally, necessarily. You're not saying it in quotes, the literal speech that was said. You're just reporting what was said in your own words. So let's go through some examples. All right, so this would be direct speech. He said, quotes, I'm going to the shops. So he literally said, imagine there's a speech bubble coming out of his head. I'm going to the shops. He said, quote, I'm going to the shops. Direct speech. It's directly what he said. To convert this into indirect speech, we now drop the quotes, and we have to obviously then change the pronoun from I to he. So now we're just reporting what he said. He said that he was going to the shops. He said that he was going to the shops. He said, I'm going to the shops. He said that he's going to the shops. First one was direct speech, second one was indirect speech. And I want you to pay attention too. Notice that when we quote him, he's speaking in the present continuous tense. I'm going to the shops. He said, past tense, quote, I'm going to the shops, present continuous tense. When we convert this into indirect speech though, we talk in the past. He said, past tense, he was going to the shops, past continuous tense. So that has to happen. When it's reported speech, you got to put it in the past tense, because now you're not literally saying what he said in the present when he was speaking. You're reporting what he said, and he said that thing in the past. You could do it in the present tense if he was literally standing in front of you and you were reporting what he was saying as he was talking into your ear. Yeah, he's saying that he's going to the shops. So you could do that, guys, technically. But that situation is unlikely to occur. All right, let's do another example. I asked her, do you live here? I asked her, do you live here? Would that be direct speech or indirect speech, guys? I asked her, do you live here? Do you live here? What tense is that in? It's in the present tense. So I asked her, and then I'm quoting what I said, so it's direct speech. I asked her, do you live here? If I want to put this into reported speech, into indirect speech, what do we do to it, guys? How would you change the sentence? I asked her, do you live here? How would you change that? And if you want, if you have time, try and put it in a comment below. I asked her, do you live here? How would you convert that into reported speech. And it starts with, I asked her if, and then I finish the sentence. I asked her, do you live here? That's direct speech. And then if we make this reported speech, if we make this indirect speech, I would say I asked her if she lived here. Exactly, Rocio nailed it. I asked her if she lived here. Do you live here? I asked her if she lived here. So you'll notice there that the pronouns have to change because it's no longer a quote from me straight at the person. It's now someone reporting what was said, and so obviously they weren't the ones who said it, or they could be, but they have to switch the pronouns around, and they also have to change the tenses. If you're reporting speech, more often than not, you're reporting something that's happened in the past. So that's why we're shifting back from present tenses to past tenses. The last example I have here, guys, and try and do the same again. In fact, we'll do this in reverse, okay? We'll do this one in reverse. She asked me if I wanted to go on a date with her. She asked me if I wanted to go on a date with her. So firstly, is that direct or indirect speech? She asked me if I wanted to go on a date with her. Is that direct or indirect? Is someone reporting what's being said, or is someone quoting the words? Lima's nailed it. It's indirect speech. She asked me if I wanted to go on a date with her. So how would we convert that one, though, into direct speech? She asked me, comma, and then the quote. What would be the question that she would ask? And you have to rearrange this. You have to put it into the present tense, you have to make it a question, and you have to switch the pronouns around. So the indirect one again was, she asked me if I wanted to go on a date with her. She asked me if I wanted to go on a date with her. And now to turn this into direct speech, we have to say, she asked me, comma, quote mark, do you want to go on a date with me? Quote. So that's the direct speech. You're quoting someone. She asked me, do you want to go on a date with me? She asked me, do you want to go on a date with me? And then to make that indirect, we say, she asked me if I wanted to go on a date with her. So that's it, guys. One thing that I thought about whilst I was answering this question was there are some cool ways to talk about quoted speech, some cool ways to kind of introduce this. And you're going to hear this in movies, and you're going to hear me say this all the time, and I wanted to teach you guys this stuff. Okay, so you can say, he said, and then the quote. He said, go away. He said, come over. He said, what are you doing? You could say, he asked the question. He screamed something. So you can use those kinds of verbs. He said, he asked, he screamed, he yelled, he shouted. You can use all those kinds of verbs. That's normal. But then there are two casual English, informal English ways of leading up to quoted speech or to direct speech. The first one is to be like. To be like. I use this all the time when I'm about to quote what someone said. And I guess the reason that I'm using like is that although I'm quoting someone, I'm saying that this quote that I'm saying was like what he said. It might not be directly what he said, but it was similar to. It was like what this person said. So what are some examples? We'll go over the sentences that I used just before. So he said, I'm going to the shops. If I couldn't remember the exact quote he said, I'm going to the shops, but I knew, yeah, he went to the shops. I can't remember what he said. I could say, oh, he was like, I'm going to the shops. Or, oh, she was like, I might go to the beach. So this now, I'm doing reported speech, but I'm saying is like, was like, had been like, whatever tense conjugation you need to use, but it has to be like, and then the quote to suggest that whatever they said was similar to that quote. I was chatting to my mate the other day and he was like, what the hell are you doing? And I was like, not much, mate. And he was like, do you want to come over? And I was like, yeah, I might come over after lunch. And he was like, yeah, cool. So you'll notice we do, it's crazy. We do that all the time. Whenever we're reporting what someone said, but we can't remember exactly what was said, but the basic message, to be like. He was like, I was like, she was like. That's a common one, guys. Learn how to use it. The next one is to go, okay? And you'll often hear this as he went, and she went, they went. and then the quote. So the other day I came home and I opened the door and I saw Dad there and I was like, "G'day Dad, how are you going?" And he went, "Yeah, not bad mate, how are you?" And then I went, so we're using to go there to say about the thing that, I guess it's kind of a weird verb to use, but the words we're using went like this. So that's why you'll hear people say, how did that song go again? How did it go? How did it go? And they're wanting to know the tune. Like, da, 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 da. The song is going, right? It's playing. So it's the same with reported speech. You want to know what he was saying, how it went. And that's why we're using the verb to go. So, yeah, he went like this, I went like this, and he was like this, and I was like this. So, yeah, what does Rocio say here? Can we also use he, she, goes? Yeah, you can. And he goes like this, and we go like that. You can change the tenses. It's all up to you and when the speech that you're talking about is set in time. So you could use the future tense. If someone steps on my toe tomorrow, and we're using an if clause, if someone steps on my toe tomorrow, I'll be like, "What are you doing?" I'll be like, I will be like. If someone steps on my toe tomorrow, I'll go, "Ouch." That's how I'll go, "Ouch." Okay, so those are two really cool ways of reporting speech, quoted speech, okay? So that's that question, and I hope it answers Nicole. It was a really good question. All right, we've got a few more here. What else have we got? Lima's got a question here. Oh, this was a good one as well. This was a ripper, a beauty, a ripper of a question. Lima wants to know, what's the difference between so, to, very, and really? These are all very common. I guess you would call them, are they adverbs? Are they adjectives? These always confuse me, guys. I think they're adverbs. Particles, whatever. You know what they are. The words so, to, very, really. For instance, it's too cheap. It's so cheap. Which is better? And what about very and really? Which is common? Good question, Lima. Really, really good question. So all of these words are very common. All of them. I would use them all. I would use so, to, very, really. Let's just go through them. So we can use so plus an adjective. So to be so big, to be so expensive, to be so cheap, to be so annoying, to be so hot, to be so cold. It's emphasis. It's very cold, it's so cold, it's really cold. Those three can be used interchangeably. Very cold, really cold, so cold. You can pick whichever one you want and they all convey the same idea. It's cold, it's so cold. It's hot, it's really hot. He's annoying, he's very annoying. So it's just emphasis. It takes it from here and it bumps it up. Okay, that is what so plus adjective, very plus adjective, really plus adjective does. It emphasizes. We can use so many and so much when it's followed by a noun, okay? And this will usually be an uncountable or a countable noun. So many countable nouns, so many sheep, so much uncountable nouns, so much money, okay? So he has so many friends. Friends is plural, it's countable. Making up words there, plural. It's plural and countable. So we use many, so many. He has a lot. He has very many friends. He has so many friends. We will not say he has really many friends, okay? He's worked so much, he saved up $1,000 this week. He's worked so much, so he's worked a lot. Again, it's emphasis. All right, so that's so plus adjective, or so much, so many plus a noun. Now let's talk about to. To is different, okay? To is emphasizing it and showing that it is bad, that it is negative. I don't want it to be this way. It's so much that it's a bad thing, okay? That it's annoying, it's negative, it's not good. It's so there's lots, but it's bad, it's not good, okay? That is when we use to, okay? It's negative, exactly. Azra's just nailed it. It's negative. So, for instance, my dad's car was so expensive. That doesn't sort of give a judgment. It was very expensive, but it doesn't make me sound like I think that was a bad thing. But if I say Dad's car was too expensive, that's me making a judgment now. When I say that, if I hear that, if someone says it was too expensive, I disagree with how much money that thing was worth. Whereas if I said it's so expensive, it could very well be worth the amount of money that it cost, but I'm not judging it. It's too expensive, it's too expensive. And that's the other example. So the other example, Lima's just said it, she's too beautiful, she's so beautiful. What's the difference here? So if I said, my girlfriend, Hakel, is so beautiful, that's me thinking that she's beautiful and it's emphasizing it, she's so beautiful. If I said she's too beautiful, now I think she is very beautiful, but that it's so beautiful, it's negative. That as a result of being as beautiful as she is, it's a bad thing. So for instance, I could use this in an example. Maybe I'm walking around with Hakel in the city. I could say, she's so beautiful. People notice her. She's so beautiful that people notice her. So, you know, maybe guys look at her, women look at her, whatever. That's fine. It's not it's just saying because she's so beautiful, because she's up here, people see her. If I use too, that would be the idea now in that same example that the reaction she was getting was a negative thing. So like, oh man, Hakel is just too beautiful. We walk around the city and people are yelling out, they're screaming, they want a photo. It's really bad, it's horrible, it's too much. She's too beautiful. Okay, so that's where we're talking about excessive. It's a lot, but it's too much. It's to such a degree that it's bad. Okay, and again, we can use too many or too much if we're talking about a noun. So he has too much money. He has so much money. He has a lot. He has too much. Now it's a negative thing. He has so many cars. He has so many. He has too many cars. That is like he has a lot and it's negative. Okay, so that's all I want you to take away from this, guys. So, very, and really all effectively mean the same thing. She's very beautiful. She's so beautiful. She's really beautiful. All mean positive, no real judgment there. But as soon as you say too, it's like it's a bad thing. It's a negative thing. She's too beautiful. He has too many friends. He has too much money. It's negative. So what else can we go on to here? All right, the last question before I get into the comments here, guys. So Natalie wanted to know about the difference between at, in, on as prepositions of place and time. Oh, this is one of those ones that I kind of dread. Because it's very difficult to explain. The best way that I could sort of explain that you should learn these prepositions is in collocations. So don't just try and work out how to use at by itself. Try and learn how does it pair with other words and I guess get the meaning of it, okay? So let's go through some examples. The image that I have here shows in meaning general or bigger, okay? So I'm going to go through this image. You can talk about time, so you would be in a century. In the 1900s, they invented the car or they invented the gun. In the 1900s. In the 80s, that's 10 years. This is a big period of time. In that period of time, in the 80s, in the 90s. In the year, you could say in the year 2001. In that year, within that year. So you imagine the span of time and you're inside of that period of time. You're within that time. So we often use in for big periods of time, chunks of time where you're inside of that period. You can say in a day, in 2 weeks, etc. We can also use in for big pieces of space, right? So an entire country. You're in Australia. You are in a city. You are in a neighborhood. You're in a town. You're in a village. So big spaces like that we tend to use in, although we use on for continents. So I don't know why, but you're talking about continents, you're going to hear on. I think you would use on. You're on that continent. On the continent of Antarctica. On the continent of South America. I think you could use both, actually. You're in South America. You're in America. You're in, I guess maybe it's associated with the continent. If you use the continent, you're thinking of a flat thing that you're on. All right, let's talk about on. On becomes more specific though, okay? So you're on a certain day, on a date, okay? So on the 15th of May in 1964, which was in the 60s, which was in the 19th century, 20th century, okay? So on a day, in a week, in a month, in a year, in a decade, in a century. What else can we do here? On someone's birthday, on the weekend, we also use it for that. We use on for a street. You can be on a street. So if you're on a street, that is like you're on the street's there and you're on the name of the street. If you're in the street though, that's the idea of more of the location of being within the street as opposed to inside of a house. So if you say I'm on this street, people are going to expect hearing the name of the street. If you say you're in the street, you're talking about, oh, I'm standing on the road. I'm standing on the footpath. I'm in the street. In the street. You'll be on a corner as well. So you're on a street, on a corner. That's how we use on. At is very specific, and it's the smallest one. Okay, so we had on, which is bigger. Apparently, in, which was bigger. On, which was smaller, and then at, which is smallest, according to this diagram that I'm looking at. So you'll be at a time. It's 7 a.m. We're meeting at 7 a.m. on a day, in a week, in a year, in a century. You'll meet at an hour. We're going to meet at 7 p.m. We're going to meet at 12 o'clock. So yeah, hours we use at when talking about time. For days, for years, for days you'll use on, and then bigger than that you'll use in. We'll also use at for locations like the beach. We're at the beach. We're at the museum. We're at the store. So that's kind of like, you imagine being up to the front of that thing. You're at the front of it. But once you go inside of it, you're in the store. And if you're at the beach, that's the idea of you're in that general location. But once you walk on the beach, onto the sand, now you're standing on it, so we use on. And if you walk out into the water, you're in the water. So I guess you just have to kind of learn these guys. You'll get them with time. It just takes practice. But yeah, there are no really, really, really broad, obvious patterns some of these times. You just have to play with it and just get used to the collocations. So at a time, on a day, in a year, at the beach, on the beach, in a car, on a platform, you know, that sort of stuff. I know you guys love thinking about or talking about transportation, so we can do that. When we're talking about anything that you don't get within and sit down, like, and can't stand up in, I should say. Anything that you get in that's public transport that you can't stand up in, you would probably say to get in that thing. And this is taxis, Ubers, cars. You get in the car, you get in the taxi, okay? Anything that you can stand up within, we would say on, because we're imagining that you're standing on a platform that is the bus, that is the train, that is the tram, that is the plane. If you can stand up and walk around, use on. I'm on the plane right now. I'm on the tram. I'm on the platform in front of the train that I'm about to get on, okay? On. If you can stand on the thing. If you are on a car, that's the idea. The car's like this. If you were to go inside, you would be here. On is more like that. You would be standing on top of the car. If you were to say, I'm on the car, I'm on the taxi. People would say, get down, get off the taxi. So that's the basic one with transport, guys. If you can stand up inside of it and stand on the floor, you're on that transport. If you have to get in and sit down because you can't stand up, you're in the transportation, the car, etc. So I hope that helps, guys. Anyway, that's it for the questions that I had been asked previously. I am going to scroll up now and see if I can find some of the questions that I saw you guys ask. So Reno, Alvaro, Smriti, Rocio, Gidia, how are you guys all going? Let me just go through. So Alamgir asks, could you please explain the following phrases? Get on with, get away with, get in with. All right. So yeah, these are difficult compound phrasal verbs where you're using the phrasal verbs get on with someone, get away with something, get in with a group of people. These are interesting because you need to sort of think about it in that it's get away, get on, and get in. That's the phrasal verb. And then with is what's attaching it to the, I guess it's the object, the thing that the verb is acting on or with, okay? So we get on with each other, we get on. He got away with murder, he got away. He got in with this crowd, he got in. So that's just a little quick caveat to think about these things. Quite often when you see phrasal verbs that have like two particles, get on with, get away with, get in with, the second particle is associated with the object or objects that follow the phrasal verb. So it suggests that there needs to be something else after it. But let's define these. So to get on with, okay, that can mean many different things. The first one is to have good relationships with someone, good relations with someone, to have a friendship. And it's like to have a very good friendship, to be able to talk a lot, to have a good time together. If you can do that, you get on with each other really well. So my family and I get on with each other. And we can just say get on together. Or we could just say get on. We get on together, we get on with each other. So I'm using with there as soon as I say another pronoun, or I invoke a person one way or another. So I get on with someone. It has to be someone, some kind of person there. A pronoun, a name, whatever it is. Get on with someone, we get on together. If you get on with something though now, it's not a person, something, that means get it done. Get on with it. So this time we're using on to be like onwards. Okay, so imagine you want someone to keep moving onwards, keep moving forwards, keep going on, keep moving on. That's the idea of making progress, going forward. So if you say to someone, get on with it, you're wanting them to finish whatever that thing is. So stop talking, Pete, and just get on with the explanation. Guys, stop procrastinating at work and get on with your job. So that is to get on with something. And I can understand why these phrasal verbs get difficult. Get on with someone is for you to have good relationships, to be able to have a very friendly time together. Get on with something, get that thing done. Finish it. Move on with it. Okay? On. To get away with something. So that means to get away. If you get away, it's the idea of you're escaping. So there's two guys here, you know, there's a policeman, a copper right here, and the thief. This guy's trying to escape. He's trying to get away, and the cop's chasing him. But if the guy gets away with whatever he's stolen, it's the idea of the policeman can't track him down. The guy got away, and he got away with something. So we can say he just got away if we want to use the phrasal verb and talk about him. But if we want to talk about the little thing that he took, whatever his object that he stole was, he got away with that object. We can use this figuratively, guys. This will be used all the time by people to say, for instance, he gets away with murder. He gets away with bloody murder. And that expression means that someone is able to do whatever they want, usually bad things, and there's no punishment for it. So often we would use this for children who misbehave and their parents don't punish those children. Man, those children get away with murder, meaning they can do whatever they want and their parents don't punish them. So that's to get away with something, to escape punishment, to evade it, to get away with a thing. To get in with someone, that would be to get in with, it would be like to join someone, I guess, to sort of become really good friends with them. So imagine there's a group of people, a group of friends right here, and this is inside of their friendship zone, okay? And you're outside of their friendship zone. You've just met these people, this group over here. You want to get in because you want to get in the group. You want to be a part of the group. So you want to get in. You want to get in. You want to enter this group of people. As soon as we want to talk about these people, though, we have to say you do it with someone, right? You can't get in by yourself because you're talking about people here. So you're getting in with all these people over here. So you get in with someone. And you might hear this, he got in with the wrong crowd, or she got in with all those girls at school. It just means to become good friends with, to get in their circle of friends. Okay, so you sort of entered, you got in. You successfully entered that group. So I hope that answers the question, Alamgir. That was a very good one. All right, let me have a look here. Whoops. So what else have we got here? All right. Devraj, hey mate, how's it going? My question is, do we pronounce the R sound in the middle of words in Aussie English? It would depend on the word. You've got to give me some examples, mate. Off the top of my head, yes. If there is a vowel on the, if there's a vowel after the letter R, you would say it. Almost certainly you would say it. For instance, reptile, although that's at the start. But what's an example? Now I have to think of a word with R within the middle of it. Interception. Yeah, so if there's a vowel after the letter R, you would have to say it to say the vowel sound. You would link the two vowel sounds with the R. So whatever words with R in them, I'll have to find an example because I can't think of it. All right, let me have a look and find some examples so that I can actually say it. And I'll take a drink first. The good thing here is that you can just search words with and then the letter in it, and it gives you Scrabble, a website for people who play Scrabble, and it'll give you words that have the letter in it. So all the okay, juryman. Okay, this is the example. If someone is on a jury, they are a juryman. Jury. So I have to say the R sound there because there's U and then there's E. I can't say Jewy. I have to say jury. So if there's a vowel sound after the R, I will say the R. If there's no vowel sound after the R, I will not say the R. That often modifies the vowel before it. For instance, bird. Okay, the word bird, you know, the animal that flies, a bird. As an Australian, I don't say the R. Americans would, they would say bird. I would not say that, I would say bird. It's just a vowel sound. And so the R there changes it to make it a long vowel sound. So you're going to see that quite a bit. What's another example? Bear. Okay, bear. Although, all right, bears. Now the R's in the middle of the word bears. I'm not saying bears. I'm not saying the R sound. I just say bears, and the R has modified the vowel to make it long. Bears instead of bears. So yeah, if there's a vowel after it, we say the R. If there's a consonant after it or it's at the end of a word, we tend to not, and we just say a longer vowel sound. So just get used to that in Australian English, mate. All right. Could you please explain the difference between should and ought? I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't think there is much of a difference. I think these tend to be synonyms, Sergio. I should do this, I ought to do this. Okay. One difference there, though, is that should is not followed by to. You follow it with the infinitive of the verb. I should do something. I should go somewhere. I should be something. If you use ought, you have to say ought to and then the infinitive. I ought to be someone. I ought to go there. I ought to do that. You have to say ought to. I believe that Americans use ought to much more often than Australians and British people do. Don't quote me on that, but I'm not very used to hearing people say ought to. However, if I do hear it, I understand straight away what it means. You ought to do this. But yeah, should is much more common, and I believe it is just a synonym. I would just say, I should do this, I should do that, I should go here, I should be this, instead of I ought to do this, I ought to go there, I ought to be this. What else have we got here? Okay, let me keep going through. It's annoying, the screen here only shows me like 2 comments at a time, so I can't scroll through a lot of them. Let me keep scrolling. So, okay, Pete, can you tell us up to, off, up, how do we use it? This is a good question. So you'll learn about this if you sign up for the phrasal verb course that I have in the description. There's a link to the effortless phrasal verb course. These are compound phrasal verbs. but they're related to movement. And so they're just talking about directions. So obviously up, off is like away from. So off is that increasing distance. Off, he ran off, off. And to is obviously you go from somewhere. So if we've got two things here, this thing is coming away from this thing. And now this thing is moving to this thing. So to is like coming towards. And from is going away, okay, creating more distance. So we can put these together though, when we're trying to describe complex movements from, I guess, the perspective of two different things. Okay, does that make sense? So imagine I'm here in this room and there are some shops up the hill. So they're up the hill. If I go to the shops, I don't just go to like this on a sort of a flat platform from one side to the other to something else. Now I have to go up to something else. Okay, so that's why we're using two things there. We're not only going up, but we're also going to. We're going up to something like this. If there were two people down here, and now I want to talk about the fact that I'm leaving this person to go off to the shops. Now I'm using the phrasal verb particle off. I'm using the particle off. So we could say I'm going up, off to the shops. You can build these together. This is where it gets complex, guys, but more often than not, I believe this is going to be related to just describing the change in movement between two things or more. And so you're going up, upwards, you're going to something, you're going towards that thing, and you're also going off, you're going away from something else. So that is why we can pair these up. We can say we're going to the shops, we can say we're going up to the shops, and we can say that we're going up off to the shops if we're going away from something. So we can kind of pair them together like this, but that's the basic idea. If you see multiple particles like that together, it'll be that it's describing the change in movement with regards to two or more things. It's that simple. It's that simple, guys. So I think that's about it, guys. I'm just scrolling through the questions again. You've done really well, guys. You've stuck with it. I think that's it. Let me see. We got one from Lalan here. Hi Pete, I like the way you've been providing live class. Could you please explain how to describe past matters using would have and could have modal verbs? Ooh, I think that one's going to take a little while, mate. So I might save that one for next week. And that can be the first one that I'll answer next week. Would have and could have. It's a good question, Lalan. But we're past an hour and I have a lesson in just a few minutes. So we're going to finish up there, guys. Thank you so much for coming. You did awesome. Don't forget to like it. Don't forget to share it. Tag friends in here who need to learn Australian English and who you think will benefit from my teaching. And if you haven't already, make sure that you get the free stuff in the description. Sign up to the Aussie English Classroom if you want weekly courses to learn Australian English. And if you're having trouble with phrasal verbs, make sure that you also check out the Effortless Phrasal Verb course, guys. You've done awesome. Thank you so much for showing up. Rocio, Lima, Lalan, and everyone else who asked a question. Nicole, Devraj, good job, guys. And I will see you all next week. See ya.